But there's one major story that we have to talk about on today's show, and that's the sale of the UFC, or as the UFC wants you to believe, there is no sale. Nothing is happening. Pay no attention to the inner workings behind the curtain.
Don't worry about all that smoke. There's really not a fire over here. Don't worry about it.
No, not at all. It's not like Lorenzo Fertitta all of a sudden is getting back into Station Casino's business. Oh, wait. According to Mike Chiappetta of Bleacher Report, Lorenzo Fertitta is now a full-time employee of Station Casinos, and he stepped down in 2008 because it was getting too much for him with his full-time stuff with the UFC. That's just a little nugget of the craziness that's probably happened the past couple days regarding this sale, and we talked about it on last week's show. But now this is a real thing, and it appears to be done. According to Jeremy Botter, who's extremely tapped in, extremely credible.
Well, he better hope so, because his credentials could get taken from 200. I'm just saying.
I mean, if you listen to Dana White on the Jim Norton and Matt Serra UFC Unfiltered podcast, you can hear a whole big story about a certain reporter whose credentials were lifted and then brought back. And you don't want to anger the UFC, apparently, if you're an
Hear me roar!
It's something else. Botter reported yesterday, actually this morning, he confirmed the report that the UFC sale has been completed to the William Morris Endeavor-led group. Multiple sources, this is courtesy of FloCombat.com, Jeremy Botter on FloCombat.com. Multiple sources confirmed the news to FloCombat early Wednesday morning that the UFC has been sold by Zuffa to an investment group led by William Morris Endeavor-IMG agency. The group also includes Dalian Wanda, China's largest commercial property owner and operator of the largest chain of movie theaters in the world. Tencent, the owner of China's largest internet portal and search engine, and the Kraft Group, which may sound familiar because Bob Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, is in charge of that. The reported deal was for close to $4.2 billion for the UFC. And to put it in perspective, Manchester United, Real Madrid, major sports franchises around the world, the soccer teams, I mean, you get the Cowboys were valued at over $1 billion. The UFC is being sold for $4.2 billion, which is frankly amazing given where this entity and this sport was just 10, 15 years ago when originally Dana White and the Fertittas bought the UFC for $1 million. And it seemed like, I mean, this is the report. We've been hearing this for months now at this point. Even ESPN's Darren Ravel had stuff like, oh, it's getting closer and closer. But the UFC does not appear to like the fact that this is being talked about. They've told their employees the reports are lies. According to Kevin Ioli of Yahoo Sports, a UFC spokesman shot down the FloCombat report. Dave Scholler, the UFC's Vice President of Public Relations, Athlete Marketing and Development, sent a statement to Yahoo Sports saying FloCombat's report indicating the UFC is sold is false. We've communicated that to our staff members tonight via an internal memo. So, and that doesn't even count the fact that a TMZ report came out today titled UFC No Sale Yet, Not Even Close. And you know the relationship between the UFC and TMZ, which is basically this was filtered out to TMZ, and this could be just literally the UFC putting words in TMZ's mouth. So there's so much going on here, Sean. Like, what is your reaction to this? Like, are they afraid that the report being out of the deal will torpedo it and blow it all up?
Well, I'm wondering if that's part of the fear, is them worrying that this deal, you know, something gets out and they're worried about the deal. Because I remember, and I didn't read the whole report, but part of the reason I believe they were mad at Erdogan was because they were afraid that was going to kill the WWE deal.
Yes, Dana White on that podcast that we mentioned earlier talked about it possibly ruining a relationship that took 15 years to cultivate. And I'm not going to try to read through the tea leaves here, but I think we can all kind of understand that may be Vince McMahon. Because they probably had to move heaven and earth to get Brock Lesnar on this UFC 200 card.
Well, they did. I mean, you're already looking at things coming out, supposedly. Van Zant might be at SummerSlam, then possible Rousey at WrestleMania. I mean, not to mention other things that happen. Plus, they're paying Lesnar probably a lot of money, I'm thinking. Saying something's doing out of the kindness of his heart, I'm sure.
Completely.
So, maybe that's something that they're worried about, because ultimately, I mean, you got UFC 200 coming up, their biggest card, the biggest weekend of events coming up, International Fight Week, and now this. So, do they want the announcement to be at UFC 200, another blockbuster announcement during a pay-per-view? I mean, is that what's happening here, and they're trying to keep it under wraps? And, I mean, they should know by now that nothing's going to be kept under wraps. I mean, I just go, you know what? We're in talks with people. Nothing's done yet. I mean, how hard is that to say?
It's a very interesting way because the UFC is portraying themselves as a small organization, yet it's risen to these new heights, and it doesn't seem like they've been able to plug the leaks in the dam to try to, this is the way we want to blow it out. And yes, if it gets reported, that's okay. Guess what?
Here's another thing, too, though, Brian, is that are they worried that, hey, look, they're selling for $4 billion? Some of these fighters are going to be going, wait a minute. Why are we making so little?
I mean, that's the argument just now anyway. So guys have been saying that forever. I don't think this is going to change the chorus of fighters' complaints about pay.
Well, no, but I think it's going to be more of a, the new group coming in, though, is going to have, I think this is a perfect time for them to sell and just get out.
Completely. Because
this is going to blow up, and you're going to have your financials are going to be out there. People are going to see what the money is being made in this. And seeing how, I won't say every fighter is probably underpaid, but there's a good majority of them that are underpaid.
Oh, completely. And this new buyer who's, like we mentioned before, Real Madrid, Manchester United, these kinds of brands aren't worth as much at the UFC. And those have been historic brands. NFL franchises aren't worth as much at the UFC. And that's incredible, given where the UFC once was. And I think they're, like you mentioned, they want to have this big blowout thing. And guess what? When you're getting this big, and when you're this important, and there's so many moving cogs to this part of the deal, and the UFC thinks there's a mole, but maybe this is coming from the other camp. There's a whole, they don't seem to get a good grasp on what's happening here. And guess what? Here's a great example. Today, officially, the NHL announced there was a new franchise that will be in Las Vegas for next season. You know when we knew about that? 2 weeks ago when it was officially picked, but it leaked out of the meeting. Did the NHL say, no, we're going to take away the Las Vegas franchise? No, it's going to completely ruin all our plans? No. They went through all of their stuff and then officially announced it today at the official press conference. You have to be able to either, A, plug all these leaks, which I don't think you can do when it comes to a massive kind of thing like this, or deal with the fact that stuff will get reported on. And, I mean, you can deny reports all you want and just say we don't comment on rumors and speculation, like you mentioned, or they can go at it in this kind of way, which I don't think is beneficial to them. It just comes off as petty. And that's not what you want. Especially when whoever's buying this is looking at it as this is the way that they've been running it? Is this the way this actually goes? And that could hurt them. But it seems like this is going to happen regardless of what goes on. And I think we'll find out with the Fertittas probably moving on to more casino business. Dana White reportedly will stay on. He'll make a lot of money from the sale, get new stock, and then stay on. So I just think it's very tense over there in Zuffa headquarters right now. And they're not having patient and proper reactions to all this.
Well, I think they run it almost because, again, they're from the casino side. So I think they kind of look at things as you got to kind of keep it secret. And there's nothing that you need to keep secret when these things are coming out. Maybe your finances. But as far as everything else, I mean, it's going to come out. And they do this on everything. We've seen it on I mean, the Brock Lesnar leak and this and that. They're so worried about relationships that, to me, doesn't really seem like they need to be worried about. I mean, if these guys are offering you $4.2 billion to buy the company, I'm sure they're okay with you letting it out.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Vince McMahon was okay with the Brock Lesnar thing because it opens up more for WWE.
Yeah, I mean, and they got a whole bunch of other problems there with one of their biggest draws.
No, yeah, well,
testing positive on that wellness policy.
Yeah,
but it's like,
hey, you know what? At least they suspend their stars. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, it's just very weird for an organization that's being sold reportedly for $4.2 billion to deal with this news and these reverberations around their sport and not being like prepared to deal with that. I don't know. It just comes off as very weird for something.
I just want to know who their PR is. Do they have a PR? Are they the PR? I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out because, look, it's not like somebody had to call Botter and all these other people and say, hey, this is happening.
Yeah.
It's not like they just accidentally rolled up on this transaction happening in a parking lot or something.
No.
They got tipped off on this stuff somehow.
And the interesting thing is, I mean, the UFC was talking about finding a mole within the company when the Ariel Helwani stuff happened. And half of the time, I mean, you get it from Dana White went on national TV on ESPN to like the night before the Brett Okamoto stuff.
Yeah.
And lied to his face.
Yeah. Yep.
And we've heard stories about Dana lying to people's faces and sending out fake information left and right. So you don't know what to believe. And that's a reporter's job to kind of parse through all the BS and find what's the actual thing of the problem. And these guys are not just going to throw out like, hey, the UFC is being sold.
Yeah, don't forget who Brock Lesnar's manager is, too. You know what I'm saying? In real life, it's a guy that says no publicity is bad publicity. So I'm just throwing that out there.
It's just a very weird spot for the UFC to put themselves in, and I think they could turn this into a positive instead of ending up looking kind of petty about all this.
I think it's too late, though. I think it's too late.
Well, now at the point when you just funnel straight news to TMZ, which it just the whole story looked really weird.
And then the fact that you have to send out a release that you have sent a statement to your employees internally,
and that's going to make the people that work there so nervous.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I mean, to me, it just seems like, look, if this was a situation, why wasn't that released when the first rumor started?
Yeah.
Now you're releasing it after the confirmation of the rumor.
They got to get their house in order,
or maybe they don't need to get the house in order because the house is being sold.
Yeah, well, they got to get. Well, the people that live in that house, they have to get their house in order for the new owners that are coming in. This whole situation is really weird. We can basically figure out this is going to happen. We wouldn't see all this smoke without there being fire. So this sale news, we can only wait and see because 200's not that close away, and you don't want to be scrambling and dealing with all this when you have the biggest show of the year of possibly the UFC's history coming up in 2 weeks on July 9th. And like you mentioned, International Fight Week. There's a whole bunch of stuff besides just that Saturday night. There's a title being defended on that Thursday night. There's a title being defended on that Friday night. There's a whole bunch of great stuff. And there could be more big names coming back to the UFC, which we'll talk about in a second.
There could actually be a debut, I heard, soon.
Oh, yeah. There could be a debut of some sort.
Like 10 years in the making.
Yeah. So this is a major deal that's going to have to be dealt with on some level, if not the highest levels, before things start.
Do we want to take a bet on if at UFC 200 all of a sudden they're doing a promo and it says UFC sold?
No, there will be no epic Brock Lesnar-esque promo describing that the UFC has been sold. But I would not be surprised if the press release is broken that week about this, or they'll wait and do it after.
Or maybe they do it on July 8th, because July 7th they've already scheduled another big event to happen on top of the fight card.
Oh, the thing that will completely overtake the fights for the next 2 days when Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz
the press
have a professional trash talking contest against one another
live on stage.
Oh, I mean, it's a brilliant idea. If only they could have done that for UFC 200 in Madison Square Garden.
Well, the thing is, you think you can't put that like July 6th and lead into July 7th and 8th and 9th? I mean, why put everything in one day?
Well, now we're just getting into the detail-oriented schedules of the UFC at this point, which is what we don't need to do. So
come on, let's take it the way it doesn't need to go.